This is the Metal Gateway Podcast.
All right, so I have a confession to make, and that confession is that I totally slept on Blind Guardian. Let me explain. This past Wednesday night, just a couple of days ago, I went to Seattle and I saw Blind Guardian live in concert for the first time ever. And I went, it was kind of a funny story about how I ended up going. I went because a couple months ago I was talking with my friend Emily, and she said, "Hey, are you going to see Blind Guardian on May 1st?" And I had remembered seeing that they were coming through Seattle, and I live about an hour and a half away from Seattle, and I had already bought tickets to see Wayfarer on Monday of the same week, so 2 nights before. And I had thought to myself, well, gosh, it's 2 trips to Seattle on non-consecutive nights. It's a lot of driving back and forth. And I was like, what do I want with Blind Guardian? But Emily was going. And so I was like, sure, why not? Like, go to a show with a friend, and go see a band I've never seen. What's the worst that can happen? I've never regretted doing that. So sure, I'll go to Blind Guardian. So I went home and I bought a ticket, and so I was like, cool, we're going to Blind Guardian on May 1st in Seattle. Emily and her husband were going to go, and it was going to be fun. 3 of us go hang out. Long and the short of it is, Emily and her husband did not end up going to the show because they had to stay home with their son, who was not feeling well. And so I went by myself, and I slept on this band. What the hell was I thinking? Like, I don't even know how else to describe it. I've been thinking about this for the last 2 days. I get it now. I get it. There are a whole bunch of people who absolutely adore that band. And the thing that I've been trying to figure out for the last 2 days is why did I not get into this band years, if not decades ago? Let me explain. If you've been listening to the podcast for this far, you know that I'm in my early 50s. I've been a metalhead since the mid 80s. And Blind Guardian's first album came out in 1988. And I have this vague memory of that album kind of in the mix of things. But I don't remember listening to it because I had remembered I had checked out first Halloween album and then the Keeper of the Seven Keys stuff when that came out. And I remember kind of thinking, oh yeah, Halloween, that's kind of fun. It's fast and it's kind of, I don't know, it had this sort of different feel to me at that time. Like in 1988, for context, I was 16 years old. And at that time, like by 1988, I had discovered some early death metal. I was listening to, Possessed, and I was listening to Celtic Frost. I was listening to black metal. I was listening to some stuff, some early stuff by then, listening to lots of thrash. But I was, at that time in my life, what I was doing was I was looking for the heaviest, the darkest, the most evil metal I could find. And I remember thinking that I kind of, like, I knew Halloween, and I think I had the first couple of Halloween albums, but I remember thinking, like, that Halloween wasn't quite as evil as I was really craving. And I felt like, in a way, I kind of poo-pooed the stuff that was coming out of that sort of milieu, right? I poo-pooed Halloween, and that would have meant that I would have just automatically dismissed Blind Guardian if I heard it at the time. And I don't remember if I heard it in 1988 when it first came out or not, but I remember it being in the mix, and I remember seeing the album, and I remember thinking, oh, that's another one of those German, like, bands with like a high voiced singer. And I was like, no, give me the growls and the screams and like the really scary shit. So I just totally poo-pooed power metal. And this is my bad. I totally poo-pooed this for years. And I remember thinking, back in about 2010, I started getting really into folk metal. And that has really not like I love folk metal, especially just European stuff. There's just so much cool stuff happening in European folk metal, Scandinavian stuff and German stuff. And anyway, and I was so excited about that stuff and I was so into it. And I was, involved in a couple of Facebook groups, and I was involved in a Facebook group where I discovered a ton of really cool music, got really into bands like Korpiklani and Teresa's and Fintroll, and, those three in particular, and some others, Metzetol from Estonia. My apologies if I did not pronounce that name correctly to anyone in the audience with a better grasp of the Estonian language than I have. So I was super into this stuff, and in that Facebook group there was a lot of Blind Guardian fans, right? Because there's Blind Guardian, not a folk metal band really, but there's definitely some crossover appeal from folk metal fans, and particularly in terms of the subject matter, with lots of like talk of like dwarves and epic battles and dragons and shit. So here I am, like, in this Facebook group, and I'm just super into it. We're talking about Teresa's and Korpiklani and all that stuff, and I'm talking about, that stuff with all these people, and a lot of people talking about Blind Guardian, and I just sort of don't participate in those discussions, because I'm thinking, well, whatever, Blind Guardian's not for me. It's something else. And I remember once asking somebody in the group, I was like, hey, where should I start with Blind Guardian? And people, of course, chimed in with lots of comments. You should start with this album and then go to this album, and then you should go to this one and this one. And of course, there was discussion and debate about those. But I don't know. I gave it a listen then. This is probably 2015, 2016. I gave it a listen back then, and it just didn't catch my ear, in the same way that Korpiklani had and whatever. And I don't know if it was the vocals or what it was, but for whatever reason, it just didn't catch my attention. And so here I am. It's 2016, and I've just sort of dismissed Blind Guardian for the second time in my life. And so I guess maybe third time's a charm, because, just a couple months ago when Emily asked if I was going to the Blind Guardian show, and I said, yeah. Then I just said, you know what? I'm going to make it a mission between the time I bought the tickets, which was like back in March, to May 1st of this year. I've got a couple months. I'm going to really roll up my sleeves, and I'm going to get into Blind Guardian. I'm going to dive in. And so I did. And not only do I finally see what, all the fuss is about, like I totally get it now, but nothing could have really prepared me for the crowd and how exciting the crowd was. I haven't even talked yet about the performance, so I'll get there. But the crowd, okay. So I get there, and the people watching at this Blind Guardian show is fantastic. So first things I notice at the Blind Guardian show in Seattle, there's a lot of people who are not white dudes. There's lots of women. There are people of other genders at this show. There are and people are just having fun, and people are like, hugging each other, and they're like, it has kind of a reunion atmosphere. People are really excited to be there. There's some costume happening. I'm seeing a couple people walking around in flowy robes as if they were just wandered off the set of Lord of the Rings. I'm just seeing lots and lots of smiles and not any kinds of negative energies in the room at all. It's just got this incredibly positive feel. It's also a very young audience. I noticed there was a couple of older people that were my age there, but there was just a lot of people in what looked to me like their early 20s and maybe some younger people. It was an over 21 show, but so I'm assuming that unless people had fake IDs, there was no under 21 people in the room, but there was a lot of people at that end of the age range in the room. And this was at the Showbox in Seattle, which is a fantastic venue, by the way, for this kind of a show. It's a large enough venue to accommodate a crowd of that size, but it also still feels very intimate. I've seen a lot of great shows there over the years. Just one of those classic old dance hall type venues that's been around for, I don't know when it goes back to, but I think it goes back to like the 1920s or 1930s. It's almost a 100-year-old venue probably. So anyway, it's a great place, and the crowd is just like, so just universally, there's this atmosphere in the air of just this, there's this lightness and this joy in the air that you can just you can taste it. It's amazing. So then, the first band comes on, Night Demon, and I posted about this on the Instagrams. Night Demon was awesome, just like straight up heavy metal band. Like, it was really cool. I don't see much just kind of straight, right down the middle of the road heavy metal, like with no, I said on my Instagram post, this is heavy metal with no other adjectives. It's just heavy metal. This is not like death metal. This is not power metal necessarily, although some people might categorize it that way. But just, they just do it really well. It was well done, a nice trio of guys that were just, doing good music, and they put on a really good show, a really good opener. And then, Blind Guardian comes on, and from like the first moments of the show, I finally see really what all the fuss is about. Like, this performance is captivating. Hansi Kirsch is a completely spellbinding performer. The guy, I know this is going to sound like a really bold comparison, but as a frontman, as a vocalist, he is the kind of performer that has an energy that I can only compare to someone like Ronnie James Dio, in the way that, two things. His presence is just electric, but not in a kind of overblown, showy way. It's very understated, but he makes you feel like he came there that night to put on that performance for you personally. So you're watching this guy and you're like, oh my God, like, this guy is amazing. And I don't even know how to really describe it. I don't fully have the words for it. It's a performance unlike I've seen in a long, long time. But I totally get why so many people, and there were people I was talking to before they went on, and just asking them, hey, have you seen Blind Guardian before? Whatever. We're just having conversation. And I think I had 3 or 4 different people that night tell me, oh yeah, this is my favorite band. Like, I just can't wait. I've seen them 5, 6, 7, 12 times, and I'm sitting here thinking, and admitting to them in the moment, this is the first time I've ever seen Blind Guardian live. Like, I'm excited about this, but I don't know quite what to expect. So they're all like, oh yeah, you're in for a real treat. This is going to be great. And, no lie. They were dead on, absolutely correct. This was a fantastic performance. So I have nothing but great things to say about Blind Guardian, but I guess the whole reason I wanted to do this little mini episode, and I'm going to wrap this up now, but the whole reason I wanted to do this is I wanted to say, look, if you slept on a band for, in my case, 35 years, it's okay. It's never too late, to just say, I was wrong. I admit that I should have given that band a fair shake back then, but I'm older and wiser now, and I'm able to sort of accept this into my life. And I'm accepting Blind Guardian into my life with open arms and with a real enthusiasm, because this is a band I should not have slept on. I should have given them a fair shake back in 1988, and maybe I would have enjoyed many, many live performances between then and now. But as it is, I saw them for the first time 2 nights ago, and I was thrilled. So, if you've been sleeping on a band, it's okay. You don't have to be embarrassed about it. Admit it openly. Start a podcast to talk about it. I don't really care. Do what you've got to do, but just go for it, This is something to be embraced and enjoyed and loved and celebrated. So go out there and tell your friends about Blind Guardian. That's what I'm doing right now. So just go listen to some Blind Guardian, please. That's all I have for today. I just wanted to give you this little episode. So thank you for listening. And I'll talk to you in a few days when my next episode of the podcast comes out. Thanks again.